History does not only record what happened, it also decides what should be remembered. Across civilizations, from ancient Mesopotamia to medieval Europe, from Arctic tundra to the Amazon rainforest, there are repeated patterns of something far more deliberate than myth-making. Records appear, testimonies circulate, debates emerge, and then, suddenly, silence. Not because the stories faded, but because they were managed. Tonight, we examine 10 creatures that were not merely feared, but gradually removed from serious discussion. One by one, across centuries. The first creature, the Anunnaki. Mesopotamia, circa 3000 to 2000 BCE. Our investigation begins in ancient Sumer, in what is now southern Iraq. Between approximately 3000 and 2000 BCE, Sumerian clay tablets describe powerful beings called the Anunnaki, often translated as those of royal blood or offspring of Anu, the sky god. These were not distant spiritual abstractions. In early inscriptions from cities like Uruk and Eridu, the Anunnaki are described as ruling figures who determined kingship, issued divine decrees, and influenced agriculture and law. But by the Old Babylonian period, circa 1900 to 1600 BC, something shifts. The Anunnaki become increasingly mythologized. Their physical descriptions fade. They are relocated firmly into heaven or the underworld. Later theological systems reinterpret them symbolically rather than historically. The transition coincides with the centralization of religious authority. A god who once interacted with humanity directly becomes untouchable and distant. The record was not destroyed. It was reframed. The second creature, the Nephilim. Ancient Levant, reference c. 1200 to 500 BCE. The Nephilim are mentioned briefly in the Hebrew Bible, in Genesis 6 verse 4, traditionally dated in written form between the 10th and 6th centuries BCE. They are described as giants, mighty men of old, men of renown. However, much more detailed descriptions appear in the Book of Enoch, composed between the 3rd century BCE and 1st century BCE. In this text, the Nephilim are the offspring of divine beings known as watchers and human women. They are depicted as violent, corrupt, and destabilizing to human society. By the 4th century CE, during the formation of the biblical canon, the Book of Enoch was excluded from most Jewish and Christian traditions, preserved only within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The giants remained in a single verse. Their extended history disappeared from mainstream theology. The third creature, the cynocephaly. Classical antiquity to Middle Ages. 5th century BCE to 14th century CE. Dog-headed humanoids, known as cynocephaly, appear in Greek historical texts as early as the 5th century BCE, including references attributed to Ctesias of Cnidus. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder, 1st century CE, mention them in natural history. Medieval European maps, including 13th century Mappa Mundi, depict them at the edges of the known world. Theological debates in the Middle Ages questioned whether these beings possessed rational souls, a serious issue in Christian doctrine. By the 15th century, references to cynocephaly dramatically declined. As geographical exploration expanded and maps became more empirical, the beings were reclassified as allegory. The debate ended not with resolution, but omission. The fourth creature, Mokombembe, Congo Basin, documented in early 20th century. Indigenous oral traditions in Central Africa long described a massive river creature known as Mokombembe. In 1913, German Captain Ludwig von Stein-zu-Lossnitz recorded detailed accounts during an expedition in what is now the Republic of Congo. Local informants described a large, long-necked, semi-aquatic animal inhabiting remote rivers. Despite multiple 20th century expeditions, Western zoology classified the creature as cryptozoological speculation. Yet the persistence of indigenous testimony remains notable. In this case, erasure did not require destruction, only dismissal. The fifth creature, the Jiangshi, China, Qing Dynasty, 17th to 19th centuries. The Jiangshi appears in Qing Dynasty folklore and literature, particularly in the 17th to 19th centuries. Unlike modern pop culture portrayals, early accounts describe serious concerns about corpse reanimation, improper burial rituals, and life energy theft. Local governments recorded procedures for prevention, including talismans and burial modifications. By the early 20th century, modernization and Western scientific influence reframed Jiangshi narratives as superstition. Public fear was replaced with theatrical horror. The threat became entertainment. The sixth creature, the Kappa. Japan, documented since at least the 8th century CE. References to Kappa appear in Japanese texts as early as the 8th century in regional folklore collections. During the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, Kappa were treated seriously enough to inspire official warnings near waterways. However, following the Meiji Restoration in 1868, a period of rapid modernization, Japan sought to align with Western scientific rationalism. Kappa accounts shifted from cautionary legend to children's folklore. River fatalities continued. The narrative changed. The seventh creature, the Adlet. Arctic regions, recorded in 18th to 19th century exploration. Inuit oral traditions describe the Adlet as part human, part canine beings dwelling in remote Arctic regions. When European missionaries and explorers arrived in the 18th and 19th centuries, they documented these accounts but dismissed them as myth. Yet exploration logs occasionally reference unexplained tracks, destroyed camps, and anomalous animal behavior. The oral history survived. The official record minimized it. The eighth creature, the Mapinguari. Amazon Basin, 16th century onward. Portuguese colonists in the 16th century recorded indigenous accounts of a massive forest creature later called the Mapinguari. Descriptions include a large upright body, thick fur, and unusual anatomical features. Some modern researchers speculate connections to extinct megafauna, such as giant ground sloths. But mainstream science categorizes the Mapinguari as folklore. As colonial expansion progressed, reports diminished. Conquest and documentation moved together. The ninth creature, the Tatzelworm. Alpine regions, 16th to 19th centuries. The Tatzelworm appears in alpine folklore across Switzerland and Austria, with reported sightings dating back to the 16th century. In the 18th and 19th centuries, some naturalists attempted to investigate sightings scientifically. However, with the rise of Enlightenment rationalism, such reports were increasingly attributed to misidentification or hysteria. The creature moved from rural warning to cultural curiosity. The danger was downgraded. The 10th creature, shadow entities. Cross-cultural, ancient to modern. Unlike the others, shadow entities appear across multiple civilizations. Ancient cave art, medieval demonology texts, and modern sleep paralysis research all describe dark, humanoid figures observed during vulnerable states. In pre-modern societies, these figures were often interpreted as spirits or interdimensional beings. In the 20th century, neurological research categorized them under parasomnia and sleep paralysis hallucinations. The explanation shifted from external presence to internal malfunction. Yet the descriptions remain strikingly consistent across time and geography. Across 5,000 years of recorded history, a pattern emerges. When a phenomenon conflicts with theology, it is mythologized. When it challenges science, it is dismissed. When it threatens authority, it is ridiculed. None of these creatures were erased in a single act. They were gradually relocated from history to legend, from legend to metaphor, from metaphor to memory. Whether one believes they were biological species, misunderstood cultures, symbolic fears, or something else entirely, one fact remains historically observable. Human societies repeatedly manage uncomfortable narratives. And sometimes, forgetting is not ignorance, it is policy. This has been Dew of Dread, where we examine not only what history recorded, but what it chose to set aside.